Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. There's a new article from Alex Cobb's website, the XRP Daily, and it's titled "Ripple is one step away from IPO," and that is a factual statement. Actually, that's the next step after Series C funding, which Ripple just went through. And so it's an interesting point of conversation. Why would Ripple want to go through an IPO given that they have a ton of money? Well, there's actually a case to be made that, at least in the short term, Ripple could, and I'm going to illustrate this for you too, I've got some numbers for you, Ripple could actually make a lot more money from an IPO, even more than just selling XRP. So, lots to talk about here, but before going any further, if you would please delicately tap that like button and go ahead and subscribe to the Moon Lambo channel if you're a pro XRP type of guy. Or even, even if you're a Bitcoin maxi, because I got a few of those. I like you, though. Go ahead and subscribe to the Moon Lambo channel, too. You are welcome here. All right, so first, shout out to XRP Christian, who tagged me along with some of my fellow XRP community members here. Thank you very much for bringing this article to my attention. So I want to run through this, and I'm going to give you some additional specifics on what I think this might actually look like if this happened. And we'll go through why. So on December 20th, 2019, Ripple had their Series C funding round, which consisted of 3 investors, and they raised $200 million. That Series C funding round alone was more than all previous funding rounds combined. The number was, before that funding round, was at $93.6 million. So then after that, $200 million, of course, simple math here, Moon Lambo's good at numbers, $293.6 million. So the Series C funding round increased Ripple's total funding by 300%. And of course, he's rounding there, but that's fair enough. They had a pretty massive funding round compared to the previous ones. Now that their Series C funding has been completed, Ripple is just one more step away from actually having their company publicly traded. Series C funding is typically meant for the company to IPO or make an acquisition. And we already know that Ripple's going down the path. They've been kind of public about this. They actually started making acquisitions in 2019. And they've made it clear that they're going to, this is not a secret, they're going to continue going that route. So this can help along those lines. But IPO is still, at some point in the future, I suspect, I'd be surprised, let me word it this way. I'm not going to stamp a timeline on this. And to me, this isn't even hype, it's speculation, that's fine. I can handle speculation as long as there's reason to believe so. And this is reason, like Series C. That's the step before IPO. So don't know when it's going to happen. It's going to happen. If I just had to guess, that's just a for fun prediction. I think that Ripple will have an IPO. Before I even finish this article, let me hop over here because there's a quote from Brad Garlinghouse in this article from Fortune. And so let me just read just a couple sentences here. As for the new funding round, Garlinghouse cited a high level of investor interest in Ripple, saying the company did not need the money, though the funds will provide, quote, balance sheet flexibility. Now, can I translate that for you? That means we don't need the money, but we'll do extra stuff with it if we have it. That's essentially balance sheet flexibility. That's what Brad Garlinghouse is talking about right there. Ripple spokesperson said its plans for the next year include hiring up to 150 new employees and adding overseas offices. So, even if you don't need money and you're flush with cash, and I joke sometimes that Ripple has more money than God, even so that being the case, you can do more if you have more, right? And they will. So back into this now, and then I can't wait to share with you some of the specifics on like the actual numbers on what could potentially come through an IPO, which I'm going to talk about in this video. But expectations by the time entrepreneurs have successfully negotiated a Series C round of financing, the company has begun to mature and prove itself in the marketplace. Venture capital firms that specialize in Series C funding are investing to make the business appealing for acquisition or to support a public offering. There you go. So you don't think Ripple's going to get sold, do you? I don't. If anything, I think they're going public, We'll see. But Ripple is valued at $10 billion and has over 500 employees, and they have offices around the world. It makes sense for them to go public, although they have never talked about it in the public eye. That's not actually entirely true. They just haven't said anything definitive, but Brad Garlinghouse actually was asked about that. I actually mentioned this in a recent video within the last, maybe it was a year and a half ago. I really can't remember. But whatever he said, I'll have to paraphrase it, but it was something along the lines of, we're not doing that right now, but potentially in the future. That's just essentially what I got out of the comment when he made it. All right, but if Ripple went public, it would bring a lot of exposure to Ripple and XRP to investors through the media, especially if the stock performs very well. And I think that's a rather salient point that Alex Cobb is making there. Absolutely, it would put a spotlight on this, which I think would be positive, especially as XRP price is still tethered to the price action of Bitcoin, much to our chagrin. Now, take a look at this. You guys remember Hodor. I know he wound down his XRP blog, unfortunately, but he did write about this. I can't remember how many months ago. Maybe it was several months or so ago, and I wanted to share this with you because I thought he had some really, really intelligent insight about what would happen if Ripple actually went down the path of an IPO. And he's got some numbers in here, so take a look at this. He's got a little subheading here, because actually I'll just tell you what this is titled in case you want to look it up. Scenario, Ripple goes public. If you want to read this whole thing, just Google it. I'm just going to cover a part of this, the meatiest, most interesting part in my mind. So here's a subheading. Capital gushes during an IPO. Despite the fact that Ripple raises money from their software revenue and sales of XRP, both of these are no comparison to the amount of cash that would be raised by an initial public offering for the company. In my estimation, Ripple's IPO should be viewed equivalently to, let's say, Uber, because Ripple's business use case should be just as wide-ranging in terms of market. While Uber claims that its total addressable market is $12 trillion based on entering new markets like mobility, food delivery, and freight shipping, Ripple's market share should also be a very sizable share of the remittance and payment market, including P2P, replacement of Nostro-Vostro accounts, and B2C and B2B payments. But perhaps it's better to look at a collection of IPOs to get a sense of the capital raised. Take a look at these numbers. Seriously, this is staggering here. High-profile IPOs and dollars raised. Uber, $8 billion. Facebook, $16 billion raised in their IPO, initial public offering. Visa, $18 billion. TradeWeb, $1 billion. Avantor Performance, $4 billion. Where would Ripple end up in terms of money raised? The analysts and underwriters involved will normally set an IPO price that is loosely, some would say very loosely, based on fundamental business factors of the underlying company. And in the case of Ripple, I think of its valuation based on a combination of its future total addressable market with an eye towards payment processing software, micropayments, tokenization, payment streaming, and smart contracts. In addition, the analysts would need to account for Ripple's ownership interest in potentially dozens of other companies as part of the Spring Initiative. In short, Ripple's IPO would be sizable. I'd say it should be judged equivalently to Visa or greater, but to be conservative, we should probably judge a future IPO as an average of the above list minus a specific percentage. And so here's the math. The average of all the mentioned IPOs is $9.4 billion. Let's assume that Ripple will conservatively pull in half of that number, half of the average in capital. So that would be $4.7 billion. So roughly $5 billion in cash. Now, that's a lot of cash. Right? And this amount purposefully excludes the market value that would be related to the value of the XRP that Ripple holds. I imagine that IPO marketers would attempt to include that in the price, but we will ignore it during our analysis. What could Ripple do with $5 billion? Well, for one thing, a massive influx of capital will sometimes create unanticipated outcomes. Unexpected wealth could prompt some executives to retire or scale back their work. Usually, however, this influx of capital from an IPO is used by the company to expand and achieve far greater levels of growth than they otherwise would. Which goes back exactly what I was talking about when we're talking about, quote, balance sheet flexibility. Like, I like that term. That's very, it's very, I don't know, it's just a smooth term there. I like it. But you can do more if you have more. And you can consider this, and he gets into the numbers here. But here, I'll just read a little bit further. There's just a few more sentences here. So thus far, Ripple has been able to access capital from its consulting revenue, software sales and licensing, and its sale of XRP from its treasury. but these sources don't compare to what an IPO could provide. Here's an interesting comparison. All Ripple sales of XRP ever, 1.1 billion. Now, this was written some months ago, so the last number that I saw was like rounding at about 1.2 billion, but still not that far off. So 1.1 billion at the time of writing here. And then he writes, possible IPO cash influx, 5 billion, which would be almost instantaneous, right? Pretty quick, right? Because that 1.1 billion of XRP sales, that's over the lifetime of XRP sales total by Ripple here. Consider this also. Now, I didn't go ahead and break out the numbers for this video, but I can tell you almost all of the money that was raised, whatever that is, so in this case, it got up to about 1.2 billion. That's almost how much money Ripple invested into the XRP ecosystem with various investments, including through the Spring Initiative. You can think about what they did with Coil, all of that. Absolutely massive, right? But so anyway, writes, as you can see, an IPO would dwarf what Ripple is able to do on its own through sales of XRP. Not only that, but the fact that Ripple is able to sell XRP might actually increase its IPO. The world of high finance can yield some surprising possibilities. And so in the short term, they'd get way more money from an IPO, this is me talking now, than if they just continue to sell XRP. In fact, they're reducing the amount of XRP that they're selling because they don't want to they don't want the market rate of XRP to go down. They don't want to have some ridiculous amount of downward sales pressure. So they're very responsible in that way. And so even if you want to calculate Ripple's holdings and how much of XRP and how much the company's worth, even if you go based on that, it doesn't really work that way, because if you consider the notional value, look, you're not going to get whatever the dollar value on paper is of Ripple's XRP. If they started selling it, they would absolutely collapse the price of XRP, which they're not doing, of course, because they're responsible stewards, right, of their XRP. And so as a result, functionally, like, even think about how much that Chris Larson and whoever else, all these holders of XRP from the early days were worth. All those were stories, and January 2018 when XRP was at its all-time high. Yeah, okay, on paper they're worth a crazy amount of money, but not really, because the second you try and sell it, the value of XRP would just evaporate, And not that it would stay down forever, but it would be down, because then there would be too much XRP on the market and people would panic and this or that. And so you wouldn't ever get that much money out, if you were going to sell it. So this is a way to have a ton of money, and you could do all sorts of stuff with it. And so to me, it makes all the sense in the world for this to happen. I just don't know what the timeline's going to look like. But if I had to guess, I'd say this would happen, and this would be more likely than Ripple being sold. But who knows? I'm not going to rule that out either. There's a fun poll here by XRP Twin. He tagged me along with some others here. What will happen in 2020? And this is a poll on Twitter. And you have 4 choices here. Ripple acquires R3, Swift acquires Ripple IPO, or the fourth one is different. And I just clicked on different because I don't know, and I just kind of want to see what the percentages are. But check this out: 24.3% of respondents. Out of 2,099 votes, there's still 5 days left, but out of 2,099 votes, 24.3% clicked on Ripple IPO. So a lot of people in the XRP community that think that this is likely, perhaps even in 2020. And I don't know that I'd kind of be surprised if it happens in 2020, but I certainly wouldn't rule it out. Who knows? Because I didn't even know that they were going to do. Who did though? I didn't know they were going to do Series C the funding. Towards the tail end of 2019, so that was a surprise as well. So who knows? But really cool stuff to think about, but it'll certainly help with the further adoption. But that is it for this video. Thank you so much for stopping by. I am not a financial advisor. Do not buy or sell anything because of anything that I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo!